We're going to talk. I kind of started one way and kind of ended up with another. So annoying adjustments made easy in Epicor. Then I kind of narrowed that down to fit the timeline. And I'm going to really just concentrate on the time we have left on something that is not maybe used often enough in Epicor, and that's the job miscellaneous charges. And then if we have time, we're just going to go over more of a how-to process an RMA. So we're going to talk about how to add that job miscellaneous charge. And more importantly, what's the impact on job cost? What's the impact on your inventory value? And what are the posting rules? Because they kind of follow a different path than miscellaneous charges as a whole. So this is kind of just anyone looking for some new tips. Our finance people, our job engineering, who are really focused on job cost. Getting the most from this webinar. I will follow up at the end with my email address. I have an end user procedure available for anyone who's interested on the RMA process. If you're thinking of an example about something I'm talking about, feel free to share that in chat. It's not just for questions, it's for all of us learning together. And follow along and learn as you will. Make the best use of our time here. I know how precious our time is. And please give any feedback too about how we can make these well worth your time. So this subject of job miscellaneous charges, what is that? Job miscellaneous charges are additional costs that you need to track on your job. So, and again, feel free to share on chat what are some examples that you use. I put down, you know, I may have an engineering fee from an outside company. I may have fees where I have to certify drawings, stamp drawings. I may have travel expenses. Freight is very common. Now, these are different than what we think of as miscellaneous charge on my sales order that I am asking the customer to pay and getting revenue for and expense against. These are different than what I pay on a purchase order. So the question is, why are they different? They even come from the same drop-down list, and that is true. But what's important to understand is you're using the purchasing miscellaneous charge, but your posting is going to be very different because it's about adding value to your job. In other words, increasing the inventory amount of your job, because in essence, that is work in process, right? If you've had to pay an engineering fee, travel, those sort of things. And you have to make a judgment call at this point as to whether it should be directly expensed, in which case it's not a job charge, it's a purchasing charge, or whether it added value to your job. And then, of course, it's costed out at shipment. So so we're going to talk quite a bit about the direct expense and the posting rules for our miscellaneous charges. What's the relationship to the work in process report, the inventory WIP reconciliation report? So what's kind of the process here? So it's, you know, the process is what we're all very used to as far as order to ship or order to invoice. We create a sales order, we create a job. We engineer that job, and at that point, we add a miscellaneous job charge, knowing that we're going to have engineering fees. We then release the job, and we do our normal things. Nobody is surprised by what I have here. We issue material. We have labor against the job. We complete that job, and we ship it, and then we bill our customer. We post that invoice and complete the job. You know, a couple things could be before or after. But what's different in this process is that we're going to also get an invoice from our contractor company, engineering company, supplier, and we need to post that invoice for the job charge. And then, of course, we close the job only after all of our costs have been included. So one tip is we're going through this process. I've put that invoice at the end, but job charges can be added at any point. And when I say including during AP invoice, that'll come clear as I go through this process. But what I mean by this is when are you going to enter the AP invoice? Well, when you receive it from your supplier and it gets approved. So if it's after, before the shipment, but after the job's released, that's fine. The timing is based on how real life works, right? So as long as there is a job created, you can add that invoice, and it then will increase your work in process value of that job. So let's just go through some of these steps that are specific to miscellaneous charge. I've created a sales order. I've created a job and linked it to that sales order, and I've got my details. I've engineered my job. But I know and I expect that I'm going to have to pay a fee to certify my drawings. And so I go ahead and I add that inside the job so I can track the costs within the job and have a true gross margin on the job that includes all these necessary costs. So it's as simple as I added a material. I went up here and I right-clicked. I added a material and I called it, I just did a part on the fly by calling it certified drawing, gave it a description, and then I flagged my miscellaneous charge and picked my miscellaneous charge for my drop down. The added material is useful if you do it after you've engineered the job. It's just a informational point. I've told it here that it's a quantity parent of 1. And then what's really important is I put in some cost. And in this case, note I put it in a subcontractor, and then I changed my scenario around. So it would typically be a material cost. It's going to want and behave like a material cost, but it's giving you the latitude of putting these in. It even allows you to say, plus I want to add some burden of 4%, or whatever your rules might be. So this establishes that this is going to happen. Because in this case, the engineer, whoever's doing the job, knew it was going to occur. Many times, that's not how real life works, right? We come back later and see, hey, we're going to have to send out an inspector and pay travel expenses. Let's add that to a job charge, because again, we're wanting to include it as part of the whole job's value. So what has happened? We've released the job, but nothing has happened as far as incurring cost. So right now we just have our estimated cost. And notice that $10,000 is in my estimated cost. So this is what's great about this, is instead of just doing a miscellaneous charge without linking it to the job, meaning I do it in the purchase order or I do it later in AP, and I just expense it out as consulting fees. Now I know for my job, 2623, no, I have an estimated cost coming up. Okay, so where are we? We released the job and we now have estimated costs that can include my job charge. And we issue our material and we do some time. So we've done those normal things that happen every day. Now we still have our estimated costs. We didn't change anything as far as our estimate goes. But we have some material and some labor and burden, just as you would normally see. Nothing really new here, but you can see how it becomes tracked. And our WIP report, of course, we have an open job, and we're adding to our balance sheet, right? We now have $5,686 in work in process inventory due to the time and labor and material. Time and materials. Okay, so now we're just shipping the sales order. Again, this is all pretty routine, what we're used to. Our costs haven't changed. Oh,
Sarah, I think we lost you. Sarah, can you hear us, Sarah?
Yeah, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, my phone interrupted me and wouldn't stop. So,
Okay.
okay. I apologize for that. So again, we're just kind of looking at the routine here of our estimated cost before we ship. And the reason why I'm going through this is so then you can see the impact when I do indeed process this charge. So now I'm to the step where I've created and posted my invoice. And again, no change in my job tracker. I'm looking at cost in job tracker. And I've completed the job. And again, no changes. And because I've shipped it and posted it on my work in process, I now have 0 value. And you see what you would normally see with your debits and your credits for a job without a miscellaneous charge. So it's going to be really interesting when you see the impact of the job charge. So I have completed my job. There's a time lag, and I get that $10,000 invoice from my consulting firm. And so how do you enter this? So you go in and just do it. And you do a job miscellaneous line. At that point, you're not going to put in any information other than the dollar amount. And then you're going to say, well, now I want to put in my job miscellaneous charge. And that's the screen you're looking at now. And you'll be able to tell it, hey, here's the job number. And here's the material from my drop down that it relates to. And the amount will, of course, come from the other, from the first header. And we're able then to populate that we have a $10,000 charge. Okay, so here's the interesting thing that happens and can stump us sometimes. So I print my edit report and I see that it's taking that $10,000 charge and putting it to AP clearing. So I just kind of want to spend a couple minutes as I go through these slides to make sure we all understand that, because what we might have expected was to somehow see, well, my miscellaneous charge goes to consulting fee expense. Why didn't it debit that? Or why didn't it debit maybe a cost account on the product group from the job? And so it's going to become clearer. Now, it is the product group of this job, because everything for this, the debits and credits here, really goes back to my job 2623. And instead of it looking at costs for that job's product group, it understands that we have a upcoming transaction that's going to look at debiting our WIP account. So it uses clearing simply to wash it out. So let's see, how does that work out? Remember, I've got a debit to clearing. And when I look at the inventory WIP, now think about this, everything has happened on the job. We've consumed all of the cost, and we've also generated revenue. So our WIP is cleared, right? So instead of just $32, I have my full $10,000. So there's my debit for the $10,000, and there's my credit for clearing. And then, of course, and we shipped it, so we costed our sales at $10,000. And over here is the credit for the WIP fabricated. So that's why we see that AP clearing entry. Okay, now what's really important, and I'm going to get to where I think this is most helpful, is the job tracker. And because we contain that job charge inside the job instead of just directly expensing it, we can see what our actual cost was compared to our estimated, right? So we can see here we had a total estimated of 17.6, and our actual is 15. So we're able to better judge, right, what kind of money we made on our job. The WIP report, of course, we're still at $0 value simply because of the timing of when we posted this, but it's now going to reflect that at some point we actually had $10,000 in our WIP account. Okay, let's talk about, well, when can I add the AP invoice? Because the again, the timing is when I receive it. It's not so important that it be after the fact or it needs to happen before I complete the job. It does have to happen before I close the job, but normally we're going to add it when we receive it. And what can happen often is that I can receive that AP invoice and the engineering department hasn't even added the charge to the job. Maybe they just didn't bother. Maybe they didn't realize it was going to occur and need to be related to the job. So a really nice feature is I can add that AP invoice to the job right in the AP screen. So it's all contained in the invoicing. So once I get approval, I can add that by going, let me go back one. Same place we were before, I added an invoice in accounts payable and I added a job miscellaneous line. And then I added a job charge. And when I do my drop down, I don't have any job charges. So instead I click to add the job miscellaneous charge right here on the fly. And I basically am adding the same information as shown before that, hey, I have a job fee of $1,000 and it's a miscellaneous charge. It's going to automatically flag it that this is added material, came later, and I pick my miscellaneous charge. It is not going to let me put in a dollar amount because that's determined by my accounts payable line. Okay. So, and then same thing, we now have an estimated cost of $1,000 when we post that invoice. Okay, one of the things I like going through all that, what did we gain from it? A lot of our top decision makers and our product managers and so forth, engineers, look at the sales gross margin report as kind of a KPI, right? A performance indicator of how we've done. Well, if those fees are getting directly expensed, then that can really overlook some jobs that maybe we didn't make money on. So you can see here, because I included it the way we just talked through, a full $10,000 is included. And that amount in this particular job is very significant. And so really looking and understanding what percentage of that whole cost, maybe it's not really worth it if we're talking about $100,000 invoice, job that's got $100 worth of miscellaneous charges or something. But it's so important for this sales gross margin report to really reflect as best we can all of the costs involved in getting that job completed. Okay, so I'm just going to summarize, and then we don't really have time left, so I'm just going to kind of show you some screens on RMAs and encourage you to request the end user procedure if that's something you're interested in. So job charges, they do not expense that related account. So if you're used to, I say that job charge is freight, it's not going to expense your freight account. It's going to actually first increase your WIP inventory, and then when you ship it, it's going to reduce your WIP inventory and increase your cost of sales. So that's why it's part of gross margin. And as I said, it will add then to the WIP value of the job during the time the job is open. After shipment and invoicing, that job charge will then add to your cost of sales and will clear from WIP. And a very nice feature is that job charges can be added in accounts payable and tied to that job at any time until, of course, the job is closed. So job charges, again, the resources available as far as that goes would be the slide deck that we are working through, which should give you a pretty good indication of how to enter them on your own. This is just a glance at my contents for my end user procedure on creating an RMA. I think sometimes we look for shortcuts, especially if a salesperson or customer is pressuring us to enter a credit, but I think it's so important to use the systems and tools that Epicor provides to give that integrity of transactions, especially something like a credit memo for audit trail. So if you're interested in the end user procedure, it's going to more so than the slide deck, it's going to give you screenshots and numbered points step by step from the time that you create the return material authorization to the time you actually have to apply that credit to an outstanding invoice. So I went through that quickly because I didn't want to go over. It's kind of a new subject for me and not commonly used, I think, the job miscellaneous charges. So I encourage any feedback and again, direct any requests for the, and this is wrong, but for the slide deck in EUP to myself or to Ernesto or to Kevin.